thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Courtney.
You've edited huge shows like Ginny and Georgia, Altered Carbon, Into the Badlands, Shannara Chronicles. You were there at the beginning of Letterkenny.
Oh, yeah.
You've also done huge cult-like shows like Rabid with the Suska sisters, The Barons, and The Devil's Carnival.
Oh, yeah.
You're award-winning, and you have so many nominations. I can't even count them. What am I missing? What am I missing?
Nothing. That's amazing that you say all of this, because I am like, oh, yeah, I have done stuff. I was just in a mix with like my director and a producer, and the producer had to leave early. And my first thought was, oh, no, like the adult's gone, the producer's gone, and now it's just me and the director, and they're leaving the show to us. And I had to be like, oh, no, I'm the adult. I'm the one with the experience. I should keep going. And I was like, right.
You have a lot of experience. How many years have you been an editor?
So actually, I started as an assistant editor when I was in my early 20s, and I was an assistant editor for 13 years. And then I started editing, I would say, including the year and a half I couldn't get hired, about 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you go to school for editing?
I did. I went to Humber College. It was a 3-year program, but I didn't even get into Humber the first time I applied because they wanted just more arty kind of experiences. So I went to Cambrian College for advertising because they had like a photography section to the advertising. And that seemed to do it. And Humber was like, oh, welcome. So then I went to Humber College.
And in Humber College, did you focus on editing or was it all filmmaking?
Your first year was kind of like general. It was introduction to film, more or less. And then I think the second year you start to focus more on what you like, and you can take more classes in that. And then the third year was like, okay, like I was like, I don't want to direct. I don't want to work with the camera. I like editing. And so you focus on that. But the problem is when I went to school, Humber College, it was either Media 100 they were cutting on or film. Like my final project was a film base. No Avids, not even Final Cut or Premiere.
It was actual film that you were cutting and splicing together.
Yeah, like I've cut a feature on film, but I have never used that skill since.
Wow. You graduated?
Yes.
What did you do? How did you get a job?
I had not a single clue that there was even a role called assistant editor. I thought that if you go to school for 3 years, then and you say, oh, I'm going to focus on editing, when you graduate, somehow there's going to be a job. I didn't know that there were unions. I didn't know that, I didn't know anything, but I was lucky enough. And honestly, it was just pure luck. My roommate at the time, she had a friend, the great David Austry, who is an editor now, but also works at the CFC. He was doing his own documentaries and he was cutting them at night. So he needed an assistant to come in and work with him overnight and then continue on and like do the cleanup and do stuff like that. And he said, if I worked for him for free, he would teach me the Avid and the basics of being an assistant editor. So that was luck because David, first off, is just a really great guy and a great teacher. But it's the only way I learned. Like, I don't know what I would have done, like how to get experience on an Avid. I mean, today it's slightly different where an education does mean something to some producers. But back then it was all about experience. And I like, how do you get yourself on an Avid to get experience if no one's like going to help you out? So I got really lucky. And what was really nice is David and I became friends, and he grew as an editor. And so he was taking me on bigger jobs. And I was like, I was like the worst assistant. I mean, I got better, but I was constantly having to learn everything new as it was thrown at me, again, I didn't even know the job existed because school didn't prepare me for that. They didn't say there's going to be an assistant editor job, and this is probably how you will enter the workforce. And they didn't say that to me, because I feel like a lot of us would have been quick enough to be like, oh, well, then teach us how to be an assistant editor.
That's so interesting. And how lucky, because weren't Avids like $250,000 and they needed their whole room? And it wasn't like you could just download it from the internet, have it on your home computer, use lynda.com, and teach yourself at night. Like, no, you needed a special room, a special computer. You needed access that I'm sure people coming out of school just don't have.
That's right, because editors didn't own their own Avids back then. It was like editing houses had Avids. And no, you're absolutely right. Like, how do you start phoning up editors when you don't even know where to find them? And also, that was like, it's going to date me, but that was before Google. Like, Google didn't exist back then. YouTube didn't, like, if YouTube existed, it wasn't in any way a helpful tool that showed editors or assistant editors like tips and tricks like that. I was quick enough to realize that I needed help. And like David Ostery was great, but he could only like teach me so much because he was still editing himself. So as I started to like get on slightly bigger jobs, you go and you start working at these editing houses, and I would meet other assistant editors. And there was one fantastic assistant editor called Mitch Lackey, and he was like kind of the top of the game back then. And he was so generous, like with his time with me, that like I can't tell you how many times I like phoned him up at like 2 a.m. in the morning, sitting on like the floor crying because my stack of 10 hard drives that were like daisy chained just weren't working. And he would pick up the phone, and every single time he would like walk me through it, because there was no other place to get information. You couldn't go to the library and take out a book or Google it. you relied on the kindness of others.
Phone a friend.
Phone a friend.
So you started with David Ostery, you moved on, you went to different editing houses, post-production houses, and as you went, were there things that you learned that they didn't teach you in school?
So funny. So like a few like little examples. Back then, and I know that it still should be in play today. I'm not sure if it is so much, but like if you're sending an email, you start with like, let's say you're going to send it to the producer, the post supervisor, and the assistant editor, or something like that. The first person's name at the top of the email should be the producer, and then it should be the post super. And so like you address emails in order of importance. And that doesn't seem like something, but you don't know when you're going to come across a producer, a director, a post super, anybody who will feel slighted that their name was behind the assistant editor. It seems ridiculous, but the film industry is a lot of like just like perception. Like, how does it look? And how do you look to others? And especially with the old guard, a lot of them really need to know that that they're the most important. The other thing was like, you basically, when you're an assistant editor, and I think back then, and it's slightly different now, but back then, like I went and got coffee. I went and got the lunches. I was like I like went and picked up like dry cleaning. One time I would like drive and I would pick up the editor, and editors are very quick and very smart, and they can see if your eye rolls, or they know when you're not like happy. The reason why I think that as an assistant editor, I was able to keep moving forward and getting better and better jobs was I quickly realized that I needed people to like me. And like technically I could get away with stuff because I had now enough friends I could phone up if I was having problems. But that was like the technical side was like the easiest part of it, because I had to make the editor feel like they couldn't work without me. School's not going to tell you that, like, yeah, your pride's going to get hurt. Like, if the editor's like really needing, like, her gum, then maybe you've got to run out to the corner store and you've got to grab that gum. I mean, I think the job of assistant editing has come leaps and bounds since when I was it, because we are finally starting to realize the magnitude of the job and what really is on the assistant editor's shoulders. Like, they're like the head of that department, in the way that they have to run it, and it has to keep moving forward. Like, it's a machine, and they're the engineer. There's no way school is going to tell you, like, your job is to, like, go and get the editor lunch. And if a director comes in or if a producer comes in, you've got to be like there and like, hey, do you guys need a coffee? Do you need anything? It's a skill to be able to, like, push your pride down and be like, this is part of the job. You have to make them believe you want to get them coffee.
That's amazing advice. That is absolutely true. So you have several assistants that you always work with, or do you always work with the same assistant all the time?
I got really, really lucky. And I think for 3, maybe 4 projects in a row, I was able to work with this, like, phenomenal assistant, Shelley. And she is phenomenal. But she's now moving on to editing. I would prefer to work with one person, because I truly see us being like a partnership. I like a nice balance in the editing room. I really like to be happy. I really like to have a happy environment. It's not all work. Like, I don't need to be friends with my assistant editor. But I like it if we can sit and have lunch and have, like, a conversation. I just believe the technical stuff can always come. It can always be, if there was a mistake, it can be fixed, especially because of this digital world. But if you don't like being around somebody, it's really hard to fix that. So I always try with an assistant editor to find one that I just like them as a human. And I think that goes back to what I tried to do when I was an assistant editor. I just really wanted to make sure that the editor felt that I was there for them.
You were an assistant, and then how did you make that leap from assistant to editor?
The truth is, when I was an assistant editor, because I was one for so long, well, it wasn't not so long, but 13 years. And Toronto is a wonderful community, but it's not that big of a film community, especially back then. So again, it was like that realization that I have to be friendly, and I have to, like, make sure that I'm not a pain in the ass, or like somebody, when someone thinks of me, I want them to think that they want to work with me because they like me and they like my work ethic. And I had a friend who was a post supervisor working on this awesome show called Ghostly Encounters, which was like this docu-series kind of, people would give like their description of like a ghost story that happened to them. And they needed an editor, and I hadn't edited. Like, I'd done like some free shorts for friends. But the one thing is that I made sure people knew that I wanted to start editing. Like, everyone who I worked with and everyone that, like, I didn't hide it. I didn't keep it to myself. I would like, and I also started like phoning up people, asking them, like, hey, if you ever need an editor, I'm trying to, like, I'll work for free. I'm trying to, like, break in. I really like put myself out there. I went to all the events, like there's like drinking nights, or there's like any kind of event. I went and I made myself like just seen. And so then, yes, back to, I had a friend who was a post supervisor on this show, and she knew that I wanted to be an editor, and they offered me the job of editing, and it was like a dream. I loved that show. I honestly, it's like one of those things. You're like, if that show was still going, I wonder if I'd still be cutting it. It was so great, and the environment was so fun, and the other editors are still good friends of mine to this day, and they were so helpful, and it was a show that allowed me to experiment with editing styles and with techniques. So I got like a lot of practice, like a lot of practice. Um, and then I got lucky, like super lucky, that Darren Bousman from Saw and Repo needed an editor to cut his scary film, his horror, called The Barrens. And Mark Shingross, who owns and co-runs Urban, saw me one day, and he was like, "Oh, Erin likes horror. Erin, I know she's cut this Ghostly Encounters." And so I just went for an interview, and I was lucky that Darren Bousman wasn't looking for an editor with experience. He wanted somebody who loved horror.
I remember you were on top of the world when
Oh yeah, we were doing reality together.
Yeah. And we were also happy because you made it. Out of all of us, you made it. You broke into scripted and on a huge feature.
Yeah, that's right. It's like you think 10 years isn't that long ago, but it feels like a lifetime. After Ghostly Encounters, I couldn't get a job in scripted. Everyone knew me, but everyone only thought of me as an assistant editor. So I really struggled, but I was very fortunate that that reality took me in, and I really enjoyed reality television. Even though some of it's not scripted, but it's like structured. But there's still the ability for a storyline to change depending on how a person is or something like that. And it's a real team effort in reality. But what the funny thing is once I left reality, I took an assistant editor from reality with me to do the Barrens. And then that company, which won't name, didn't like it that I took this assistant editor, and didn't like it that I left reality. So when I finished the Barrens and I couldn't get another job, I went back to this company and said, "Hey," and they were like, "No." And I was like, "Okay." And then that was like a year and a half of not working. Yeah, yeah.
We've all had that. We've all had that. That's the nature, I found that's the nature of freelance. And when you consciously make an effort to not take reality anymore, obviously you were trying, but I mean, like, it's kind of a weird snobby atmosphere. There's reality and there's scripted, and they don't really like it when you intermingle the two, right?
Very much so. Like very much so. It's really interesting. And now I think with reality, especially now becoming so popular and so much better and so much more well-rounded, you can see how they're getting closer. But it's true, there is a line that's still kind of drawn between reality and drama. But I mean, reality editors, it's like I think the hardest working editors are any editor who cuts a documentary. And then reality editors are very close behind because there's so much footage.
There's so much footage, and there's almost no script, and they have to come up with everything themselves and create it out of nothing.
Yeah, because you might get like a poor producer who doesn't really know what they want to do with that episode. So it falls on you, and it's expected of you to create it, and you're just like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm doing this time."
It's a good training ground for us.
It really is, and it also is really good with work ethic. School doesn't talk to you about work ethic, and especially in the film industry, especially for women, you had to continuously prove yourself. You had to show that you were smart, you were likable, and that you were willing to work really, really, really hard. Because if it was 8 o'clock and you'd been there since 8 in the morning, you couldn't back then be like, "Well, I'm into overtime. or I'm going home. Like, you're expected to stay there because everyone sees post as a much like relaxed atmosphere when it's not, but there's an expectation. And so, yeah, like when you're in school, they don't say be prepared to like 2 months work like 16, 17-hour days or like 14-hour days, whatever. And a lot of the time, you're just going to be sitting there while the editor is working, and you're just going to have to sit and wait until they're done their day, and then maybe you can like start your day or start the output. Like you don't realize how long a day an assistant editor puts in, because uh, they're there all the time, and they're expected to be. This isn't school's responsibility. But I do think, especially a film school, because we're freelance, how to structure our money. Like, you're on a show and you're just getting a check every week, right? And it's like amazing. But then, yeah, you could go 6 months without a job. So even if there was one class about money management in the beginning, you're going to be off work more than you're going to be on work. So you need to focus on how to structure, like, how to get you to the next job, kind of a thing. But I really believe that the biggest thing is just interpersonal relations, and how that is such a key to being successful in this industry. And it's a really tough subject to teach, but it should have been at least talked about. There's some assistant editors that technically are highly superior, highly superior, but I can't say two sentences to them, because they're not somebody I want to be around. But that's important to me, like that is important to me. I truly believe that the technical stuff, you make a mistake, you learn from it, and then you keep going. But I want somebody who, if we're going to take lunch together, I can sit and have a conversation with them.
That's a good test of whether you can hang out with somebody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love your advice. I think it's absolutely correct. It's about the personal skills, being likable, being hardworking. And the thing with the technology is it's constantly changing and evolving.
Yes.
So what you learn today won't be relevant in a year. So that's why those personal skills are key.
The word being likable, I can see how a lot of people will not like that word, like being likable, but it's a skill, and it is a skill, an absolute skill that I worked constantly on, And then when I became an editor, you still have to be likable to the director, to the producers, but I also found that the new skill is how to be a good manager, boss, between me and my assistant editor and with my post supervisor, and not to get upset. The nicer you are, the more I feel personally that people will want to go a little extra for you. And if I'm mean to people, well, no one's going to want to come into work, or they're not going to be as excited about it. And so it's a real skill to also know how to just work with other people.
So amazing. Thank you so much, Erin Deck.
Thank you, Courtney. This was so fun.